Picking up where we left off, Project Soul Catcher by Dr. Robert Duncan. I'll recap just the last few paragraphs before going into mind viruses. The interesting part of this virus is that the entire process is being automated except for a human observer who needs to evaluate the effectiveness. The interesting part of this virus is that the entire process is being automated except for a human observer who needs to evaluate the effectiveness. Neural programs run just like any other program on a computer. The brain is walked through each state until the program completes or the host is dead. A human brain can be forced into each new cognitive state through the sensor and nervous system, influencing technologies described in the previous volume of Project Soul Catcher. The program proceeds at a rate determined by the individual mind that it is being run on. This is really a hybrid virus because parts of it are interactive and other parts are pure replays of state changes. But all that matters is the end state of maximizing destruction, and that is almost always achieved over time. Improving the time from onset till death is an important metric for the success of the mind virus. Unfortunately, the current subjective experience of these weapons is a slow torture to death. Since the process of identifying targets, hacking into their minds, and then playing the malicious neural code is automated, a real danger of a weapons system destroying the human race lurks behind the scenes if the proper safety protocols are not in place. Except in deep ocean, the United States global human surveillance grid is total, barring the passive acoustical arrays laid all over the seas. When we left off, the Space and Naval Warfare Systems Command Surveillance Program Directorate Strategic Plan. Mind viruses cause symptoms classically recognized as mental illness. I repeat, mind viruses cause symptoms classically recognized as mental illness. The psychology community in the last 40 years has had many charlatans in important positions who were CIA paid to further develop biocommunication signal hacking techniques, brainwashing, and split personalities. They were able to introduce over time many new categories of psychosis that were previously extremely rare, that covered the symptoms and behavior of those who are targeted with mind viruses today and who are subject to mind hacking war games. Trojan horses. A Trojan horse is a piece of software that usually has a useful purpose, but contained within it there lurks malicious and subversive monitoring and control program, which opens back doors through firewalls once they are inside. The computer is usually turned into a zombie. The military programs to create remote control soldiers were in fact called Zombie 1 through 5, I believe is what it's telling. But a Trojan horse in mind hacking terms would be best analogized to an infiltrated agent who is on the mind network. But a Trojan horse in mind hacking terms would be best be analogized to an infiltrated agent who is on the mind network, perhaps even unaware that they are. The agent would be able to pass all polygraphs and lie detector tests in order to further their infiltration into an organization. But at any time, their mind can be usurped for saboteur purposes. The Air Force calls this program personnel effects, whose research comes out of the Directed Energy Directorate, currently still classified top secret. They mostly focus on perception warfare methods. Side note, a professor discovered a universal private key inserted in Microsoft encryption security negotiated, most likely by the NSA. Corporations tried to push the V chip into television electronics, but it was stopped due to privacy concerns about television watching habits being monitored. One might be able to justify why certain government agencies need remote access to all computer systems. That is, with all power, it is abused and has corrupted those with the access. Footnote says a zombie is a remote controlled computer usually used in a distributed denial of service attack. Okay. Weapons grade hypnosis. Most researchers have not yet been able to link the details of the CIA's program called RHIC, Radio Frequency Hypnotic Intracerebral Control, for the development of mind hacking technologies to the hardware and software systems in place. That is it necessary for a hypnotic state to be induced in order for the target mind to accept the biocommunication signal? There is even disagreement about what the EEG pattern of someone who is hypnotized is supposed to look like. Some researchers claim it is the desynchronizing of the two hemispheres of the brain. Clearly, a forced hypnotized state in a target has many benefits to creating programmed assassins and having the target mind a limitation, except subliminal or overt biocommunication suggestions. But is it necessary or a limitation of the way biocommunication weapons need to work in order to play and map other brain signals to a host mind? Let's try that again. Clearly, a forced hypnotized state in a target has many benefits to creating programmed assassins and having the target mind accept subliminal or overt biocommunication suggestions. But is it necessary or a limitation of the way biocommunication weapons need to work in order to play and map other brain signals to a host mind? The comparable state in the computer hacking world would be a remote controlled zombie. A computer that has been zombified with a piece of code that turns the computer into a slave anytime it wants perhaps could be considered hypnotized. The remote controller can suggest anything to the target machine, and it will perform the instructions even while a legitimate user is on the machine running their software. Back Orifice, written by the famous hacker group Cult of the Dead Cow, zombifies machines with remote control monitoring and control software. It is included in the CD for security analysis in the teacher's edition. Worms, mimetic viruses, and psychotronic viruses. And this is not slow reading, it's fast reading, rather. This is slow reading. That ought to sink in. Understanding the different nomenclature, I haven't read in so long, and vernacular of malware is important for discussion. Worms differ from viruses in that they spread using networks such as email. One might call creating fads a form of a worm. It spreads using social networks rather than computer networks. The difference between a mimetic virus and a worm is that it spreads purely in the mind space via human communication with the intention of altering culture or detrimental purposes. Examples might be propaganda or political slander and rumors. Viral marketing has elements of both worms and mimetic viruses. Psychotronic viruses are specific to electronics influencing the psyche. The Japanese have worked on a technology called silent cassette. It is supposed to implant subliminal messages into the viewer who watches white noise. It wasn't very successful, but movies have made their own horror spin on it. An episode of Pokemon cartoon accidentally stumbled on an effective psychotronic virus. A flashing rate of roughly 6.3 hertz caused 700 Japanese children to go into seizures. The episode is banned. Psychotronic viruses attack the human mind using electronic signals, either through their senses or directly into their neural firing patterns via more complex methods. zombification, and remote control attacks. The objective of many computer hacking strategies is to insert software that allows remote control and monitoring of a computer without the user knowing that it is there. While the attack could be directed to a specific computer, in general, zombification payloads recruit an army of machines before receiving instructions from an unknown server via virtual or physical hardware connections. The U.S. Army called their project Zombie 1 through 5 when zombifying human beings. Their research involved creating remote controlled soldiers who would blindly follow instructions like zombies without questioning the morality and ethics of what they do. The zombie slaves could receive their instructions through an earpiece or brain chip implant. Modern technology directly sends the instructions to the brain via neural encoded instructions, often called bioamplification, without brain chips. In popular literature, this technology is called mind control via psychotronics. These programs by the U.S. Department of Defense, CIA, have created sleeper agents, assassins, and an army of disposable assets all over the world. Current estimates of size are 10,000 people with 10,000 handlers. About 2,000 of these are in the United States. Of course, only a small percentage will be successful. These sleeper cells can be activated all at once or individually. Zombies, hypnotized humans, can be used to commit acts of aggression with several levels of indirection and therefore have a high degree of plausible deniability for the criminal minds that activated them. Proxy wars are nothing new as a strategy, but these technological methods are. Side note, sleeper cells and sleeper agents are activated for different purposes. Let's say, hypothetically, John Lennon sounds like communist propaganda. We will send out a psycho sleeper to kill him. Hypothetically speaking, if Ronald Reagan is becoming senile, he is a security risk for national secrets. We will activate a sleeper. If a defense contractor becomes an alcoholic or sex addict, she may be a security risk. So we silently assassinate them with seemingly natural causes. If the Kennedys don't fit in line with our agency's objectives, you get the point. CIA programming braggart. Suicides, car crashes, poisons, heart attacks, cancer induction, or mental drugs and viruses have traditionally been the methods to eradicate undesirables, but programmed assassins are used for high-profile targets. So they're coming at you with suicides, car crashes, poisons, heart attacks, cancer, and mental drugs, and viruses have traditionally been the methods to eradicate undesirables, but programmed assassins are used for high-profile targets. Well, that's good to know. Maybe I can have a peaceful death as opposed to my life. Scalable enslavement and zombification strategies. How many minutes have I been reading? Not yet. Computer viruses and worms scale quickly by having every infected machine try to infect every other computer it has access to via network or email list. The most successful virus in history was 23 kb long and infected 80% of the world's computers in less than 3 hours. Mind viruses are designed to only infect about 1% of the population, but this is by design. The goal is not to kill the whole human race, just enslave it at a pace that will not be noticed by those who have yet to learn about the methods. Telling people to read books. Remote lobotomies, menticide, and mind hobbling are useful tactics in putting down humans that begin to become too aware of this strategy. The Nazis used a similar tactic of gradually shipping off Jews to camps, family by family. Enslavement works by increasing the technological gap between military and civilians. For example, let's assume that the echelon monitoring system for the mind doesn't work very well yet, and that no key thoughts trigger a warning system. Simply by analyzing brain patterns, though, it is obvious who uses their brain more than 10%. These are the people that could threaten the spread of the mind-limiting viruses. So, like with how HIV works, attacking the possible immunity of the species or culture or group first is of greatest importance. This strategy was credited to the Russians. This is similar to the way thieves cut the wires off the phone and power and use cellular jammers to make sure an alarm system can't signal out. More sophisticated alarm systems use radio technology, which can be jammed or their radio codes intercepted digitally and duplicated. Many car locks, garage door openers, TV remotes, etc., are intercepted by the signal and communication warfare unit to do these things. A human being's life can be completely manipulated using a fully integrated system. Winning the hearts and minds strategy uses a scalable enslavement strategy. This is often called the sheeple effect. Weak minds tend to herd rather than use critical reasoning to go against the grain. One will learn later in the book that brains can be programmed while they are sleeping. This is another strategy to win the minds of people during their weakest states. Spiders. There are many types of computer science techniques to gather data on the internet or intranets. Search engines use a technique called spidering to search the internet. The software follows every link from every page, categorizing the key important words by various algorithms. They traverse the tree of published knowledge continuously as updates occur. With the human network, social groups and connections are spidered to determine related links and relationships. Who your friends are turns out to be very important on how you are judged by these systems. These social networks, whether on the computer, phone, or physical proximity, are analyzed and classified for purposes of routing out possible spies, drug rings, terrorist groups, militias, dissidents, nonconformists, peace protester, whistleblower, and subversives. The FBI and CIA have kept files on almost every person in the US for decades, but this process has become much more automated. We hope that abuse won't happen with these secret systems, but there is no transparent, overt method to stop it. Data mining these in more metrics identifies targets for closer scrutiny. Bots. Bot is short for robot. The difference is that bots are purely software automation tools and don't control physical manipulators. It is simply a term for software code that automates complex tasks. In the human equivalent, many humans serve functions and can be thought of as robots. This elicits an interesting question. Many futurists pictured a world where machines did everything for us humans and we lived the perfect life of luxury. However, as it turns out, computers have become smarter than we are. Humans are good at mechanical tasks. Technology evolves faster than human intelligence and genetics. Computers will be the brains and humans the mechanical animals controlled by them and integrated with them. Sounds futuristic, but this is the inevitable conclusion and will happen much faster than the commoner will believe or realize as it happens. Appendages or subsystems don't consciously know they are being controlled by higher order intelligences. Intelligent agents are basically bots which perform a function on behalf of a human. For example, a program can scour the internet for the best price of a concert ticket and purchase it for the user. These programs are called intelligent because they have some logic built into them and perform somewhat complex functions on behalf of a human. Mankind is obsolete. In the mind hacking world, intelligent agents are people who carry information and perform secret tasks without them even knowing the greater context of which they are doing it. They can be couriers of information or mind controlled drones performing thoughtless tasks. The word agent means to do on behalf of another. Ironically, government agents are generally not intelligent, but are given the impression that they have access to intelligence information that most are not privy, thereby creating the oxymoron of intelligent government agents. Brute force hacking master slave role. So do this and hold the page up. There we go. Brute force hacking involves a set of hacking tools, one of which is an old technique called war dialing and brute force password hacking. A computer system scours the internet IP address space, or in the old days, dials through sequential phone numbers until a modem is found. Once a compatible system is identified, the program initiates a set of attacks and common security holes in an operating system. Cycling through every alphanumeric permutation to try every combination of username and passwords is one aspect of a brute force attack. Once entry is gained, the host computer becomes a slave to the commands of the master. This technique has two parallels in the mind hacking world. Breaking a human is like breaking a horse. Traditional slavery techniques of beatings are applied wirelessly. Brute force password hacking is similar to scanning for brain trace echoes and furthering every possible permutation from there. See memory probing for other uses of this technique and found in the feature set of the TAMI system described in this book. Side note, making modern day slaves. Interviewee. These biocommunication weapons are repulsive and amazing. The best I can do to help someone understand their power to control humans is to use an analogy. This is modern day slavery. Imagine that you have a choke collar on, and if you remove it, it will explode. The collar provides electric shocks according to the handler's directives. Just with this capability, depattering of good behavior for survival can be erased and bad behavior can be reinforced. If this technology was available during the slave trade in America, they would never have let it go. Cueing executables, subliminal and hypnosis. Batch processing of computer programs causes them to run at specific times or in a process triggered by another program. With programmed assassins and the like, triggers are created to execute emotions and programs in humans with specific trigger stimuli such as words or sounds. Complex hypnotic sleepwalking tasks can be induced in the subject without their having any memory of the event according to declassified CIA documents. Viewing human beings and their minds as a set of programs and algorithms creates a framework that is reproducible in the majority of the species. An interesting note about the secret army of programmed assassins is how they are trained. Like an athlete, images of how they are going to do their mission is repeated over and over in their mind's eye. In addition, the information on explosives, maps, and techniques to assassinate the target are also injected into the Manchurian candidates. These programmings can take years before the fruit of the programmer's labor can be realized. This is why the U.S. keeps a constant flow of new non-consensual candidates. Non-consensual. These assets are then triggered when the conditions arise for plausible deniability or media distraction. Logic and memory buffer overflow. You can't outthink this. A warning from a government psychiatrist to a mind control target. There's not any way that I can read out loud as quickly as I do. I'm gonna have to adapt. You can't outthink this. A warning from a government psychiatrist to a mind control target. One of the first viruses to shut down many of the world's computer systems was written by a guy who went to the Hotchkiss School, then to Columbia University. He accidentally miscalculated the frequency of which the virus was supposed to copy itself, even if the computer it was trying to infect had already been infected. He did this so that an easy inoculant was not found. He was off by a power of 10 in his calculation. This caused the virus to fill up the disk drives of every machine that it infected, thereby shutting down the systems. He was made an example of and sentenced to 7 years in jail. Buffer overflow is the most common way to find hacks into computer systems because it is such an overlooked programming condition. Using one's own thoughts against a target creates an unwinnable situation, too. The person will defeat himself is the strategy. It is a checkmate using cognitive warfare techniques. Human memory and focus of attention has its limitations. There is a finite brain bandwidth of topic. There is a finite brain bandwidth of processing information. This is the technique used in media influence and propaganda. Stimulus, then response over populations, shaping humans' perceptions of reality will be discussed in more detail later. The psychological term is called information overloading. The cognitive warfare jargon calls it chasing the white rabbit, after Alice in Wonderland. On the most part, it means in colloquialism a red herring or misdirection. A buffer overflow in computer science is the most common kind of successful computer attack these days. Due to a common programming oversight, most software is riddled with this kind of security flaw. Most of Microsoft's security patches involve a fix to a buffer overflow security hole. It basically works like this. There is a fixed amount of memory allocated in the heap or stack of a program to input some stream of data. The assumption is that the primitive procedure will ensure that data stream sizes greater than the buffer will be handled appropriately. This can be complex. Often, due to multiple threads and consumer producer bandwidth mismatches, the input stream writes past the end of the buffer's memory into an executable program code. If the overwritten buffer data is actually executable code itself, excuse me, then when the program runs that code at some point, the hacker gains complete control of program execution. A bootstrapping method is then followed that loads more hacking tools to continue the process of gaining complete control of the host computer system. A buffer overflow in the human mind occurs when the short-term memory and logic checking systems can't keep up with the information presented, often called information overload. Hucksters and hard sales techniques in boardrooms, fly-by-night scams work on this principle. By presenting lots of information to a person quickly and pressuring them to make a quick decision on that newly presented information allows the con artist to lead the victim to a fallacious decision against his or her best interest. They take control of the logic process in this way, or a person's program execution. While these strategies have been well known and consistently rediscovered for hundreds of years, the information and psychological warfare units have turned it into a science. The practitioners of mind hacking use panic and direct verbal communication via audio cortex stimulation to practice buffer overflow hacking on targets. However, the same techniques can be used in face to face interrogations or even sales propaganda and politics. It can be done to societies because many cultures only have a memory of about 30 years as a collective. This is why history repeats itself with all its mistakes. Genetic algorithms and directed evolution. Hi, Yvette. Hi, Tansy. Oh, thanks. I hope my reading improves. Human beings, as they develop, have difficulty understanding the statistics of seemingly random complex systems. Human beings, as they develop, have difficulty understanding statistics of seemingly random complex systems. The gambling industry is based on this mental deficit. Genetic algorithms in computer simulation use the same principles as evolution, a statistical probability of survival. Technology development is based on a similar principle of trial and error. God is a tinkerer. Mind viruses and brain signature algorithms can be used to mold, develop, and entrain a mind to basically anything. Human brains, composed of their computing circuitry called neurons, can be thought of. I better make where I can see the page, huh, folks? Start again. Human brains, composed of their computing circuitry called neurons, can be thought of as a colony or tribe of cells in their coordination. Genetic algorithms can explain not just evolution of life on this planet, but also technological development and even the development of animal minds in their lifetimes. Cell structures change in accordance to demand and relevance. They die off during their lifetime as well as memories fade. Just like the DNA, societal cultures are brain cells. Evolution has inadvertently created what we are today. But what happens when only a few people understand these concepts? Unfortunately, all knowledge can be used for good or evil, valued at different times by us humans, and propagandized by victors of conquest to our children. Obviously, our objective as cultural engineers is to optimize happiness and productivity over the longest span of time humans will occupy this planet. However, this book has a focus on the dark side so as to shine the light in these dark spaces of human thoughts in the US CIA. These same mathematical concepts are being used to direct the evolution of the virility of human malicious programs, mind viruses, enslaving the human mind while justifying it. That if we didn't, our enemies would, is the mentality. Let's see what everybody's saying. Okay. I agree that they do want our souls, and they want to, in my opinion, they want to try to take a little at a time. If they can't, if you won't get on board, then they just try to get you in a position of compromise. And a little compromise leads to a little more compromise, and take as many out as they can. All right. And this is what's next. I see your teaching notes. Such most Americans find it unfathomable that the U.S. government would test drugs and pain weapons on random citizens, since they pretend to be here to protect us as a necessary evil. Only if your random numbers come up do you get to see the dishonorable and disgraceful minds in action. Associated Press. Washington. Non-lethal weapons such as high-power microwave devices should be used on American citizens in crowd control situations before they are used on the battlefield, the Air Force Secretary said Tuesday. Domestic use would make it easier to avoid questions in the international community over any possible safety concerns, said Secretary Michael Wynne. If we're not willing to use it here against our fellow citizens, then we should not be willing to use it in a wartime situation, Wynne said. Because if I hit somebody with a non-lethal weapon and they claim that it injured them in a way that was not intended, I think that I would be vilified in the world press. Researcher comment. Clearly in their twisted mindset, they have our enemies' well-being placed before the people for whom they work, the U.S. citizens. Secretary of the Air Force Michael Wynne was fired or forced to resign after the U.S. Air Force misplaced 5 armed nuclear weapons. Don't worry, they found most of them. Air Force General Hayden took control of the NSA and then the CIA, allowing spying and human experimentation on American citizens to continue. A dark, disgraceful legacy indeed. Dr. Mengele was referred to as Angel of Death due to the grotesque human experiments that he conducted on Jews, especially children in prison camps, and in the experimentation he did in psychological hospitals on Germans and Jews. The CIA has a similarly, I can't talk again, is a similar long history of doing the same. They have been caught infecting African Americans with syphilis to watch the progression of the disease. testing radiation on Down syndrome children to study cancer risks, and brainwash people with depression using torture to reduce them to childlike states at McGill University. Now the CIA and Department of Defense are testing maximum pain and torture to death weapons on random people all around the globe. But this is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of their human experimentation to develop more weapons and shape the weak minded humans' beliefs. Cognitive warfare, propaganda, and herding beliefs of citizens is a major thrust in this research. Additionally, increasing intelligence is a goal, and one of the reasons people get it says napped, NAPPED, enter cybernetic hive minds. What would happen if you could increase human intelligence tenfold? How about 100-fold? Would you, that person, begin to view the rest of humans as food as we do other animals? Would you be a good warfare weapon and warfare strategist? Would you, that person, decide you were part of a super race like Hitler thought of German people and start a directed evolutionary eugenics process? Archangel Gabriel is also known as the angel of death in some Bibles. In order to increase, this is the acronym SATAN, kill capability using behavioral modification techniques, England and the United States use human subjects chosen from every social group around the world to converge on the best kill ratio statistics. These techniques will be covered in more mathematical rigor later in the book on the chapter called Satan, SATAN acronym, weapon Satan. Side note, interview with an MK Ultra project. Interviewee. It is sad. I fully believed and trusted the U.S. government before they tortured me. I never worried that through the Patriot Act that they would use access to my medical records against me. I'm sure you know this, but they use insulin shock during brainwashing and memory erasure. I was diabetic, so they used the access to my records to proceed with their program to create what I later read about as a split personality programmed assassin. So much for patriotism. Now I see this government will use every bit of personal information against us. The U.S. government agents used this illegal, unconstitutional law to know how they could hurt me, brainwash me, then use me for false flag operations against U.S. military targets, all while discrediting my testimony. I'm sure they would have made deceitful connections to some terrorist group for the media if they had been successful. Interviewer comment. Unfortunately, the reader will see later that induction of post-traumatic stress disorder to study it and the resilience factors of people is just one of thousands of the experiments on targets and why they torture U.S. citizens. Other important statistics are gathered for the Satan weapon system. It requires many data points to improve its kill effectiveness for war or eugenics programs. See murder after the fact, legal analysis. Discussion questions. Is there a flaw with gathering data from innocent, nonviolent people for a weapon to be used on potentially violent enemies? Or is it more of a challenge to turn a good person into a Manchurian candidate? If they can do it to the best and brightest, can they do it to anyone? What makes for a good candidate? Why are people selected? Or is it mostly random like in drug trials? How does the U.S. government go about hiding human experimentation? Good question. How does the U.S. government go about hiding their human experimentation? Why does every president pretend not to know that it is going on? Or do they? Spoofing, infiltration, the psychology of persuasion and authority, privilege, trust level hacking are tools in spying and espionage. Corporate espionage is big business. Obviously, intelligent operatives use these same techniques. This is where multiple personality programming becomes important and why it is so intensely being researched. If a spy gets caught, they need to pass polygraphs. This makes it superior to acting the part as the other alter personality does not even know what the other has done. Pretending that you are something other than what you claim is spoofing. Computer hackers use a technique called IP spoofing and email spoofing. It is an attempt to falsify the identity and source of information. It is another confidence game, but in the information world. The hacker gains access to the computer or user by pretending that the information is coming from a trusted source. IP spoofing allows a hacker to, IP spoofing allows a hacker to access a computer network, and email spoofing makes the reader believe that it is coming from a trusted person that they know. In mind hacking, several techniques are used. Even during World War II, encrypted messages were spoofed to the enemy and phone calls placed with imitation voices, and scribed letters forged. In the Gulf War, the U.S. used voice transformation software to mimic Iraqi generals' voices during spoofed mobile phone calls to the commanding subordinates in order to give them false orders. In a direct mind hack, spoofing is done with synthetic telepathy, a biocommunications technology. Sounds and voices can be forced into a target's perception. By using a similar technology to voice sampling and transformation, a target can hear speech and voices that they are familiar with. This is a strange technique because, of course, that person will be nowhere in sight, so the target is left feeling and looking insane. However, due to religious belief system, the voice of God, which the description of the technique implies, is believable by those who have never experienced biocommunication technology before. Other successful spoofs include aliens, because again, the technology appears too advanced to be from Earth, is the uneducated and immediate conclusion drawn by many. There is about a 60-year gap between civilian and military technology in this particular weapon. By spoofing who the attacker is, the retaliation of the target can be redirected to another enemy of the attacker, thereby creating levels of indirection that has plausible deniability by the country of origin. This technique was written about in several Bibles and is called false flag in the Pentagon literature or proxy wars. Agent provocateurs, traditional, have been used, but this further level of indirection is now preferred. Other uses of spoofing involve traditional behavior modification techniques such as Skinnerian, depatterning, psychic driving, and neuro-linguistic programming, even if the target knows that the voice can't be coming from the person who it sounds like. At a subconscious level, the associations are still made without her says content. Social engineering, identity theft, and doppelgangers. Spoofing could also include the class of hacking called social engineering. A famous hacker, Kevin Mitnick, used social engineering to spoof his identity and get employees of companies to give away their passwords. Spy agencies use spoofing of legitimate government officials to gain access to information in places they normally would not have. Fake badges and good acting abilities go far with social engineering tactics. Spoofing emails is easy and described in detail in the suite of hacking tools for educational purposes only. Included on the CD, they came with this book in the teacher's edition. If one had the inkling, one could make another individual run around town, move to specific locations, or apply for certain jobs, all with falsifying web pages and emails, spoofing legitimate sources. If you had the ability to intercept phone calls and emails, you would be able to almost entirely control someone's life without too much risk of suspicion. See communication warfare. Along these same lines, phishing is a form of spoofing too. By sending out what looks like a legitimate email from a bank or a credit card handler to hundreds of thousands of people with a link to click on in order to update information, a hacker can get most people to unwittingly give away their passwords. The emails are spoofed for the fake blah, blah, blah. I think we know how that works. The person enters their username and password on this fake website. Their life savings can be cashed out, often weeks before they even notice. Furthermore, their entire identity can be stolen and further debt racked up. A vindictive hacker can even destroy relationships with spoofed emails, phone calls, letters, and the like. The CIA uses this technique to isolate this human experimentation project. Yes, I've met people that had that done to them, and they were pretty angry, and they had a lot of bridges burned. I know it's been done to me, but I no longer bother with it. Now, in the less familiar world of mind hacking, voices can be spoofed just like on a telephone. In both World War II and Desert Storm, the U.S. military used voice transformation software to mimic the enemy's military leaders' voices in phone and radio communications to misdirect them. The direct neural stimulation of audio cortex frequency perception circuits can put voices in the head of the target or throw voices from any direction, called ventriloquism. Ventriloquism. See Voice of God weapons for other scripts used to spoof religious deities. Hey guys, if I knew how to put that link in there, I have no idea on this map what I'm doing. It's like I'm starting from scratch knowing nothing. So if people get bored and leave, I won't understand. Later in this book, the reader will learn that doppelgangers are real, using fascinating technologies to change a person's appearance and voice. Doppelgangers can be done with computer-generated images and voice transformation technologies for virtual spoofing. Facebook has had a problem with this kind of identity theft. The CIA likes to hire identical twins as spies and assassins for obvious reasons. You can imagine how tickled pink they are with human cloning. The Japanese and Nazis looked to replace American government with their own members. Think about how easy this would be with cloning and plastic surgery. Did it happen with our culture? The U.S. puts in puppet governments in many countries. Authority, privilege, access, and low level. Factors that increase perceived expertise and authority, which then increase trust. Selective demonstration of in-depth knowledge in some areas uses the false assumption that that level of intelligence and expertise spans across many other fields and areas of human knowledge. Lowering self-confidence in the receiver through presentation of unresolved paradoxes for them, creating insecurity and lowered trust in the receiver's own knowledge base. So, selective demonstration, creating insecurity. Asking them questions they can't answer, then answering it. Herding mentality. Planted patsies. More people who one hears express an opinion gives the opinion more validity without any further investigation. This is why geographic areas become homogenized with political views. Offering something to the receiver. There is a subconscious quid pro quo assumed exchange that the receiver should then increase the trust level of the source, keeping the receiving person off guard by not being a threat. If the source is perceived as naive, it will be assumed that they are not capable of sophisticated deception tactics. Faking being mentally challenged, for example, or having childlike qualities will increase the confidence level for many kinds of information. Trusted realms. If one is a member of the same higher trust realms like religion, occupation, nationality, etc., the group's basic trust level is granted to the information source. Noise generators, jammers, and scramblers. White noise is defined as a uniform random distribution. The reality is that computers don't actually generate a pure random number. They generate random numbers using a complex deterministic algorithm with a seed value sensitive to initial conditions. Radioactive decay is used for true random signal generation. With sophisticated analysis and massive computing power, the built-in random number generators of personal computers can be reverse engineered, endangering certain types of encryptions. When noise only occupies a particular part of the spectrum or is not uniform in its distribution, it is called pink noise. Noise generators are a kind of jammer. On the CD that accompanies this disc, companies and plans are included for white noise jammers to block cellular phones, TV signals, and radio reception. In the first volume of this book, signal-to-noise ratio was analyzed in biocommunication and radar signals. It is important in all communication and signal intelligence theory. Jammers work on many different theories depending on the type of signals that are to be jammed. Overpowering the receiver with noise is the most basic strategy of jammers, but newer technologies have increased the sensitivity of the receiver's decoder using error correction, adaptive echo feedback, and ultra-wideband techniques. Jammers and scramblers are also studied in the field of electronic warfare, which uses radio frequency interference to disable equipment. Devices like the wave bubble can send out a counterpulse or broadband noise to jam radio and phone communications. However, changing electromagnetic polarity direction needs to be taken into account in such jamming devices. Low frequency waves are very difficult to jam to, requiring much power and setup to exactly cancel out the influence. We will only briefly mention how all these fields of signal intelligence and communication warfare interrelate. False flag signal intelligence includes cloaking and camouflage technologies mentioned later in the book. For now, let's just consider simple false signal jamming techniques. A good ASA, Army Security Agency, example was used to falsely trigger Russian nukes. The device was called the Milky 29 and included tamper-proof techniques. It had to be placed a couple hundred yards from the missile launch pad and buried. The device was simple in nature compared to today's signal jamming technologies that use digital signal processors. The Russian nuclear warheads did not arm themselves until they were 10 meters out of the launch mechanism. Is that actually what it says? The Milky scanned the spectrum rapidly, putting out detonation signals. See the similarity of full spectrum radar signals. If the Russians had launched their nukes, they would have exploded upon launch. The tamper-proof mechanisms of 2 ounces of C4 was triggered using inductance, capacitance, and electric field of anything near where it was buried. A similarly basic technology is being used to jam or detonate roadside bombs in Iraq. EMP, electromagnetic pulse weapons, can be used to explode suicide bombers before they reach their targets. But due to the damage of electronics in the vicinity, the U.S. has been reluctant to use this technology to protect buildings. Communication interception and overpowering a counterfeit communication is a preferred method for communication channels. See voice transformation and communication warfare. Pirate radio stations are a small version of this concept. In the information abstraction of white noise generation, scrambling, and jamming, we entered the field of study called cognitive warfare and counterintelligence. Throughout this book, the same themes at different abstraction levels should be recognized by now. The idea behind jamming and scrambling information is thoroughly studied in the U.S. Air Force College. There are common cognitive errors that most humans have. Taking advantage of these errors in warfare or for domestic strategic deception is the directive. This includes disinformation, misinformation, and misdirection through flooding the information streams of the target society. The information noise is created using common weaknesses in human algorithms, often called the method. For example, by telling a true statement such as mind control is being used, and then finishing the article by a statement, the aliens developed it, will split readers into either believing all of it or none of it. This sort of belief segmentation is discussed in the cognitive model and decision tree hacking sections of this book. Viewing human beings as subsystems of larger systems leads to non lethal weaponry and disabling techniques and technologies. Humans receive information through their senses. How can one jam and scramble human senses or even the mind itself? The term non lethal is, of course, a euphemism for this class of weapons. Anything done in repetition is lethal. Many are used for torture to keep the body alive while inflicting unimaginable pain. Our focus here is just jamming the senses and mind. Ninjas use flash powder grenades to temporarily blind their opponents. Today they call them blinders and dazzlers. Tear gas is another example of how to temporarily blind the opponent. Cheap, high powered diode infrared lasers can permanently blind an opponent without them ever seeing where it came from. The US has banned these permanently blinding weapons. The US had to retrofit the M1 tanks' laser rangefinders because they had the potential to blind. Strangely, the US can blindfold, rape, torture, and kill, but can't permanently blind. Read the book CIA Medical Abuses and Their 30-Year Journey into Madness. Also read Secret Weapons. Humans have many senses and capabilities. It is traditionally taught that humans have five senses, but this is an oversimplification. For example, the inner textbooks. The inner ear creates a sense of balance and direction, but isn't described in basic biology textbooks. Hair senses touching differently from that of touch on the skin, but no differentiation is made in textbooks. Humans are made up of far more than five senses. Vibration is a subcategory of tactile senses but uses a different mode of interaction. There are countless examples. The objective is perception warfare, is to jam all possible human senses from balance, vibrational, sight, sound, heat, smell, taste, etc. Typical non-lethals use malodorants for smell, dazzlers, blinding lasers, tear gas for sight, rock music and sirens for sound, and more sophisticated gases and signals for balance, drugs like LSD, etc. All these traditional methods are being depreciated due to this newer technology perfecting, overriding every human perception function at higher levels of understanding. These poor young people who get seduced into this industry thinking they are defending their country, many will be terminated simply because they know too much to retire. Everyone eventually gets betrayed. A former CIA operative. The Nazis didn't lose the war, they just had to move. Mark Phillips, a former CIA agent. Torture does not represent the values of this country. Those who order it should be prosecuted according to the rule of this land, but not those who did it. President Obama. Phreaking and mobile phone cloning. Phreaking, spelled Phreaking, is an old term for hacking into communication PBX routers. Mobile phone cloning is another form of phreaking. Yet again, we find direct analogies to mind hacking techniques, while communication warfare is very much part of the integrated information weapon system. The previous volume covered this topic. Our attention is on how biological minds can be cloned and hacked. See MIND, an acronym MIND. Phishing and brain scanning, finding hosts. How are human hosts identified and found? While the possibilities are limitless, our interest is in current metrics for selection of non consensual HUMINT, HUMINT, acronym for human intelligence, i.e., spies and remote control soldiers, i.e., Manchurian candidates. That's not good. Finding spies in other countries is often called a phishing trip. Phishing is a term on the internet which means to email spam to many millions of people until one bites on the bait. In psychic warfare and psychic spying, it is similar. Fishing is a hunting tool in sport. It works based on luring the fish to bite on something that will capture them. There are many examples in evolution which work on this principle, like the Venus flytrap. In information warfare, this is true as well. Watching what people research can bait the potential spies to be captured. While most human non-consensual experiments ask, why me? There is no rhyme or reason other than the US government selects targets at random, like in drug trials, which need to be spread across all races, education levels, and cultures for accurate data on effectiveness. Protocols of human projects require that they are studied for a lifetime. Only if their budgets increase or targeted persons die do they grab new projects. There seems to be a cap at a percentage or a fixed number. To date, the CIA, DoD, has not released the size of the programs officially, and in the past they have destroyed tens of thousands of records when Congress has asked for them for investigations. Coprocessor usurpation. Graphic card processors have a flaw in that they can execute code. Hackers figured out a way to utilize this subprocessor to avoid detection of infiltration code away from antivirus software. Example code provided on CD in Teacher's Edition. Well, we don't have that. Examples of this technique could be an influential advisor like a vice president. Dick Cheney is given as an example, or a first lady who influences the president. These situations make the designated leader merely a figurehead, similarly of how a subprocessor can take control of the CPU. Inserting secret hooks in device drivers. One of the most prevalent computer hacking techniques is to insert a handle in the operating system that executes other services or processes without being detected. There are several equivalents in the CIA, NSA, DoD realm. They use blackmail, extortion, or doppelgangers. Doppelgangers is a fictitious, shape-shifting character that behaves similarly to the person whose function they have subverted, while appearing approximately the same. Many crime organizations use similar tactics. One might think of this as a mole. Malicious payloads. As always, you, the reader, must understand the computer science lingo before understanding the equivalent of hacking into human minds. Malicious payloads is a term for malware, software in computers that intentionally cause damage to information systems or the hardware they are connected to. These programs can come in a form called worms, Trojan horses, or viruses, but the lingo goes on. When it comes to the biological computing system, there is the equivalent in computer science jargon. Of course, those that believe in an untouchable soul will not be able to comprehend this science. The brain, however, is easily accessible and has no firewall. See The Mind Has No Firewall article from the U.S. Air Force Information Warfare College. Okay, guys. I do thank anyone that dropped by. I've been yammering on a long time, and I'll catch y'all later, I guess. Baby dog, are you gonna come say hi to everyone? Come. She says, "Oh no." My dog says no. She's She'll charge a horse, she'll charge anything, but she wants nothing to do with this camera because she knows if I can see them on the screen, they might show up at the door. So forgive me and my dog. It's nice of everyone to come by. I hope that you can understand my speech. Um, don't give up, guys. Don't give up. Never give up. Bye, guys.